flags are going on.
I'd like to call to order the June 19th, 2012 meeting of the Milton School Committee. And as is our custom, I invite you to stand and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our agenda this evening is probably the shortest agenda on record, which is basically the one item of discussion and vote for the interim member of the Milton School Committee. The only thing I would add to the agenda is just at some point, I just want to talk a moment or two about summer meeting dates so we can get a couple of those settled down. We are, I believe, confirmed for the 27th of this month, the final Wednesday of June. But beyond that, we don't have any other meetings scheduled. We just need to get a consensus of where we might go with some of those. The process for this evening is the Board of Selectmen are posted to join us at 8 o'clock. So we have an hour to talk about our feelings about recommendations for filling the vacancy on the board. We can proceed on this in any number of ways. I mean, as I said before, the process, the only prescribed process in the law is that the final appointment has to be done by a roll call vote jointly of the two committees. But how we get to that is up to us. We can discuss through here and put together, say we want to have 4 names for discussion with the selectmen. We could say we only want to put forward 1 name to the selectmen. In my discussions with the chair of the Board of Selectmen, I don't think they're interested in going through 11 names. I think they would rather we made some progress on that ourselves. So I think, and not to put words in Tom's mouth, but I think there's a certain deference to say that this person is our colleague and that the selectmen are willing to yield some authority to us to put that person on here. So I think they would be just as happy if we came forward with a recommendation. So between now and then, we have any number of ways we can proceed on that, whether people want to just talk about what they're looking for in a candidate, or whether people want to put forward names, or at this point, I think I would just like to keep it as a discussion, and at some point, we'll, entertain a motion to, recommend 1 or bring forward 3 or whatever to the joint meeting that begins at 8 o'clock. So that's, are people good with that as a process to just sort of start walking through it? Okay. Anyone have a real preference in how they want to start this? I will, but just...
I think talking about our preferences, not names, but our rationale for choosing them. I know that we had addressed that partially during the interviews because someone had asked us that question, but it's probably good to go through it one more time. What do you think?
Sure. Well, I'll reiterate what I said, since I answered at one point there as well during the
Very well.
during the when it was asked us during the interviews. My feeling on this is that this is an interim appointment. It's a 10-month appointment. We're not making any requirement, nor could we, that the person run or not run in 10 months. That's entirely up to that person, and that person will choose that at the appropriate point. So from my perspective, we're just looking at someone to fill a vacancy for 10 months, and what happens beyond that happens beyond that. So my principal concern was, as we all have been through, there is a significant learning curve to joining the school committee. It takes a while to get up to speed, and often for a 3-year term, it takes the better part of a year to get up to speed till you feel like you're comfortable with all the different things we're doing, and even find out all the different things that we do. So my perspective is to look for someone who can come up to speed most quickly, either through some prior experience, either in terms of budgeting or with, experience with Mary Gormley and the PTOs or somewhere where they've seen some of the things that we've done before, so hopefully they can move forward more quickly. And so that is my rationale going forward. So I'd invite anyone else to chime in or go from there.
I totally agree with that rationale. I don't think I could add anything more to it. Basically that, either having the feet on the ground in PTOs or whatever, school involvement, and a skill set outside that would be, beneficial to the work that we do on the school committee.
I have specific things, so I have a list, so.
Go right ahead.
Let's hear it.
Been thinking a lot about this. So and I know everybody is going to say this and agree with this, the 11 people that came forward, hats off to them. It's a hard thing to do. It's a great thing to do. You're putting yourself out there, and it's a risk. I think it's just, And as a school social worker and as an educator, I want everybody to play nice and get along, so it's very hard to think of picking someone. But being that said, that's our job to do, and we have to make these hard decisions. So I had 5 criteria for me. That's the correct way of saying it. 1, I want somebody who has experience in education. I think that that's really important, given that that's our main order of business is education, and I think budgetary experience is really important, fiscal responsibility is really important, but I feel like you need to know what it is that we're doing, whether that's to hit the ground running, whether to understand what makes a school system work. It's not a business, but it has to have business values, so it's really important to me that the person has education experience. I have 5 things, so I'll just keep going if that's okay. For me, it's really important that the person has a vision from elementary to high school. Some folks were like, well, I have elementary, or I have this, or I have that, but we don't just deal with one level, we deal with all 3, and we know that because we're on the school committee, but it's not doing anybody any good if somebody comes in with just one level in mind. It has to be the entire budget for the entire school district for all 3 levels, and that's really important to me. This, I think people probably won't, not everybody will agree with me, or maybe nobody will, but I think it's really important to see both sides of the French immersion and the English program, and that's the hot button topic, and people have strong opinions on it either side. But for me, this committee, for me, has been about collaboration, collegiality, and communication, and I feel like we have a major issue with the French immersion and the English programs that we need to solve, and we need somebody to be proactive and think about how do we solve these issues, support both programs. So that's important to me. I'm almost done. And history of volunteering in the schools. Everybody who came to us had history of experience of volunteering, whether it was the Warrant Committee, town sports, PTOs, schools, overrides. I'm missing a few, I think, in there. But for me, it's really important to have some volunteer experience in the schools so that you understand what the schools and the school administration and the school committee go through. And then the last one for me is I think it's important not to have employment ties to Milton Public Schools, whether it's your immediate family or it's yourself. I think that even though Glenn answered that and that ethically it would meet the letter of the law if you recused yourself, I think it would be really hard in terms of pressure if you were employed by the Milton Public Schools or connected in your family to somebody who was, to recuse yourself on things to do with the budget. I just think that's a slippery slope to me. Where's the beginning, where's the end? How do you know what's going to impact you or not? And to me, that's really important that the person we appoint is not connected that way to Milton Public Schools. If they want to run and they get elected, so be it. But in terms of my appointing somebody, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. So like I said, those are my 5 things. I had a lot of thought about it, so that's what I have to say.
Mary Leroy?
Please.
Come on, I'm alphabetically last.
Okay, so first of all, I apologize I was not able to attend the actual interviews, but rest assured, thanks to Mike Lynch at the Cable Studios, he provided me with a tape, so I did see all of the interviews.
Well, it's probably a DVD, not a tape.
Oh, I'm sorry. Technologically, I'm a little behind. I must say that I tend to have a different perspective on this. This is a unique opportunity that doesn't always present itself in elections to balance out this committee. If we look at who we represent, or where we are from a familial perspective, I think we have 3 members who have no children left in the schools, and we have 2 members that have high school attendees. I think it is very beneficial to a committee like this to have a balanced representation of the different schools. And sometimes, and especially for elementary parents, you're just getting into sort of the whole school atmosphere, and it's difficult to put yourself out in an election process. But here we have in this appointment process a number of elementary parents who have offered themselves to be, to be part of this process. And I think that we should consider that as a pretty important aspect of this. That opportunity, like I said, doesn't always come up in elections. And I think with regards to hitting the ground running, I quite frankly know of people, myself included, who came to the school committee on one specific issue primarily. I know my mom, who ran many, many years ago, came because she had children in 2 different elementary schools who were getting 2 different educations, and she wanted to help fix that. So it's not a bad thing, and I think if history will tell that she served to be a pretty good school committee member. Sometimes it's the instigator that gets you the additional push in your life to put your name out there, but that won't tell what a participant you'll be on the committee. I think it's your commitment once you join and the effort you put in to get your learning curve going. And I think my hope would be that anyone who's appointed would expend that energy to get as much knowledge as they need to basically help this committee out. And so my perspective is a little bit different than what has been presented, and we'll see what happens.
So I would totally agree with you on the elementary parent, and I don't know why I didn't say that earlier, but that's absolutely an important piece of it for me. And I also want to just pause and just say how wonderful it has been to have all these people come forward and go through this process. It's something that I don't remember the last time it was done in the school committee, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Mr. Alphabetically Last Walker?
Yes. It seems that we have reasonable consensus on the criteria, so that's encouraging. I had 5 as well, and this one will sound familiar. First is the ability to be a participating member of the team, and that has 2 aspects to it. One, obviously, is coming with some knowledge or experience that will help the individual to get up to speed quickly, as Glenn and others said. The second part, though, is what Kristen alluded to, which is that I need to feel that this individual is going to be a collaborative member of the team, and to continue that approach that we have of being collegial. So that's the first thing. Second, some experience in the education field could be helpful. Some experience in or with school systems could be helpful. Some record of commitment to or involvement in the schools, probably through volunteer work, but that could come in any number of ways. And then I also agree some budget or fiscal experience is helpful. School budget experience is even more helpful. So there you have it.
So,
We have a go ahead.
One thing I would just like to, I guess, add into this discussion, and that is, and it's not so much on the process that we're going through now, but the process going forward. I think it's somewhat, I'm appreciative of everyone who's come forward, and I think it's terrific. I think it's unfortunate that we're in this position. We had a momentum going towards the end of the year where we had a lot of things planned, and this sort of put a big monkey wrench in it. I wonder if the committee at some point might entertain creating a policy by which if a member of the committee entertained running for a town-wide position that would prevent them from serving on both in both positions, that we require them to resign as a matter of process. Just because this has been, it's a great process. The fact that we have 11 people willing to put their name on the line, I think is fantastic. But it does go to the committee as a whole in terms of our process and our momentum, and I think it has been a distraction, and would hope that perhaps we might try and remedy that going forward.
I think that's an interesting discussion, probably for another night.
Right.
My worry with it is you can't require an elected official to resign by policy. I mean, they are elected, and in fact, they could serve on both boards. There's nothing that prevents you in the law from being a selectman and a school committee member simultaneously, for instance. So, it's a tricky one. But we'll address it, I think, another night.
It's beyond the scope of tonight's discussion.
I think so, yes.
I think she really wants to be on policy, don't you?
Get me a pointer.
So, I'm hearing reasonable consensus on some of the features we're looking for. I'm not hearing any great arguments about what we are or aren't looking for. It seems that many people are saying very similar things.
Can I just be clear
Yes.
on one thing? It's not that I'm saying I don't want an elementary person. I want somebody who will represent the whole district, even if they come from the perspective of elementary, middle, or high school. That's important. So I get it that it would be nice to have some different parents on the board. I completely agree. But I would, just want to make sure that they understand it's the whole district that we're responsible for. That's my point.
And I guess my perspective is, I don't think anybody running for this particular position is doing it only to represent the elementary, and I don't know how you would have gleaned that from any of the interview process that happened. And so to apportion to them that they would be only representing one school or another, I think is, I don't know how you would get to that point. So I think anyone who has an understanding of what being a school committee member is, and anyone who has taken the time and effort to put their name forward, understands that they will serve as a guider of the whole system and not just one. However, that being said, having a particular expertise in terms of talking to parents at elementary level gives this committee and this board and sort of our goings-on a different perspective that we may not have right now because we don't necessarily have that connection.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for connections within the school. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, my connection in this committee has changed since my kids have left the system. I mean, it's just natural. You do a different set of interactions with the system as a school committee parent of graduated children than I did as a school committee parent of middle schoolers and high schoolers. I think it's just natural because you're doing different things. And I think that connection is not to be downplayed. There is value in it because you see things from a different perspective. You can see things now from I see things now from sort of a global and somewhat more detached perspective, working off, I remember how it was when, but how it was when isn't necessarily how it is now. So there is something to be said for ties into the system at different levels being represented on the committee.
Maybe we could just sort of agree to disagree on that, because obviously I see it a little bit differently, and I don't know how people would be about that. I was just putting out what's important to me, that people need to know that this is important. You don't just come and represent one section of the school system by statute, by practice, by common sense. And so maybe it's just my way of saying, hey, folks, this is really important. To me anyway, and I hear it from everybody else too. I just see it a little bit differently. So we have so much else to talk about. We should probably just agree to slightly disagree on this, and I'm willing to move on instead of going back and forth around it, because I think
Well, I think
we have other issues that,
our choices and votes will reflect our slight
Yes,
difference of opinions
exactly.
on many things. So, how would people like to proceed? Would you like to go around and pick a number, top 3, 4 choices, and say, this is, people I'm thinking of, or do we look for consensus there? Would you rather, we can do it very formally and do a ranked 3 from every person or 4 from every person. We could do any number of different ways. Eventually, the object of this is to get down to some sort of recommendation vote to the joint committee that, convenes at 8 o'clock or whenever we get to that point. Mr. Walker, I thought you might have an idea.
I do. And if everyone followed my suggestion of ranking the candidates from top to bottom, no need to disclose the exact rank at this time, but I would suggest that each of us offer our top 4 people in no particular order, and see how many matches we have in terms of candidates using that approach. So if we have one candidate that's on all 5 lists, that would be a great thing, and so on.
Are people comfortable with that as a process, or would you? So, yes.
I agree, but if we could have a little step in between where, because there were things we did agree on, or most of us agreed, or whatever, in terms of what were the qualities that we thought were important, because some we don't agree on, but some we do. I mean, I heard everybody say some experience in education was really important, right? Did I hear everybody say that?
No, I did not say
So,
that. As the only member who doesn't have educational experience, I don't know.
and then the volunteer part, I don't know about Mary, but I heard everybody else say the volunteer, some experience with volunteering would be helpful. I'm just trying to recap what I think I heard people say that we agree on in terms of the qualities. No, we don't have agreement on those?
Oh, I think we do. I think there are probably 4 that we have agreement on.
Which are,
But I think that's not as important as what choices that
right,
encourages us to make, so.
right. I was thinking of it as framing the discussion before we get to the, like, a little step before we name names. I would be curious what people thought were the most important qualities.
I feel like that's what we just did.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I hear, though, that it's education, volunteering, and budget for most of us, or no? Did I miss something? Getting to the ground quickly on either education and/or budget? I mean, I'm just
Well,
trying to get a sense of,
No, I don't
Frame it.
think we got that to that level. I think, from my perspective anyway, hitting the ground running, which was my sort of idea, would be at least, some of those.
yes.
Not necessarily
Yes.
all of those, not necessarily any one specific.
Right.
I mean, when we look at what our year looks like, certainly a huge portion of our year is spent dealing with budget. We have a year coming up where we're going to be doing collective bargaining, and that's going to be a big part of our year. There are things coming up here, and to the extent that people have experience with one or more of those things, it's good. But I'm not putting a litmus test on to say that you have to have experience in A or B, or I'm not going to consider you,
Okay.
just personally.
Just trying to think of a way to streamline us.
See, I think we'll get to that, and I think that's an important part of the discussion, but not at the beginning, at closer to the time we're actually trying to make a
Okay.
choice, because that's when we should compare and contrast the candidates and
Got
what
it.
they bring. So I
I
think,
can live with that.
let's try to get the names out and then
Yep.
see what that tells us
I
about
have a chart. we
whether
can-
we're close or far apart.
Okay.
All right, so we're comfortable with sort of an unranked 4 as a process?
Yes?
People have them, or you need a minute to run? Kristen's writing, I'll let Kristen write.
No, I have my notes, but other people can start.
I have a chart, I'll just tally them here.
We want to do this in a particular, should we
Let's go in reverse alphabetical order.
reverse alphabetical order? All right. I think that would be you.
My four, in no particular order yet, are Padera, Sullivan, Kasuba, Zulus.
My four are Karimbakis, Kasuba, Padera, Varela.
That would be me next, I guess. This is almost going around the table, except you two are sitting in the wrong places. My four would be Zulus, Padera, Varela, and Karimbakis.
And
Who's the last
Karimbakis,
one?
sorry.
Karimbakis.
you're next?
I'm next. Mine is Chuck Karembix. I don't think I pronounced that correctly, I apologize.
Karimbakis.
Karembikis, okay. Adrian Sullivan, Justin Renz, and Mike Zulus.
Can I pass?
No.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, Varela, Sullivan, Padera, and Chuck. Come back to me in a minute, and I could give you 4 more names.
Karimbakis.
So we have some consensus on the two top vote getters were Karimbakis and Padera at 4 each. Zulus at 3. Is this somebody?
Julio has, Varela
3.
has 3.
Is this Sullivan has
Where-
3?
Sullivan, sorry.
Where are your votes indicated, Ms. Sherman?
Mine are right here. So Karimbakis has 4, Meg Kasuba has 2, Becky Padera has 4, Justin Renz has 1, Adrian Sullivan has 3, Julio Varela has 3, and Mike Zulus has 3.
So we have some consensus around 3s and 4s, I would say. So we have, what, 5 names we're looking at currently,
Should we
correct?
drop off Justin Renz because he only has 1?
No one's really dropped off, but let's concentrate on the 3s and 4s where I think we have more. I mean, God knows on the 23rd ballot, you might,
Well-
pick anybody.
Can you just say it again in the numbers, because I was writing it in 2 different places?
Go ahead.
Sure. Karimbakis has 4,
I think it's the spelling, okay. Thank you.
Meg Kasuba has 2, Becky Padera has 4,
Okay.
Justin Renz has 1, Adrian Sullivan has 3, Julio Varela has 3, and Michael Zulus has 3. So I think it's safe to say we're taking out Renz, no?
Well, we have, let me just say we have 5 people with 4 and 3 votes at the moment.
Okay.
Which seem to have garnered more support. All right, do people want to refine their discussion, given these names out there? And on the one hand, the 2 people with 4 votes, Becky Padera has been a PTO president. Chuck Karimbakis is currently the incoming treasurer of the PTO, so there's a PTO thread between those names. Adrian Sullivan and Julio Varela, Mike Zulus, there's quite the common thread there. Mike Zulus from the Warren Committee, Adrian Sullivan, elementary parent, was the first presenter last week, and Julio Varela, who was involved in overrides and PTOs, and so we have different people with different. The 2 top seems to be a PTO thread. The other 3 seem to be less of a thread. Yes, Mr. Walker.
So I suppose that the question is, how long would we like for this discussion to be? It
We
would
have
seem-
25 minutes till the selectmen get.
Well, it would seem to me that we have 2 candidates with 4 votes each, so why wouldn't we just talk about those?
I just think it's 4 or 3, I mean, if we could just talk it through, then I would feel better. I mean, any of these I could probably live with and be happy about it, so ultimately, but I don't know. That's just what I think.
All right, well, I mean, is there a... I think the best way to put this, if you were to have to choose from among these 5, what would you be looking for? Or do we want to try to get to 1? Do we want to leave it at 5 for the selectmen at 8 o'clock? Do we want to get it down to 3?
No, I think 2 is acceptable, 1 would be great.
Sorry, I'm just
But
pulling
we
out
have 2 with
resumes.
4 votes, so I don't know why we would
Well-
talk about the individuals with 3 votes.
If we could, I could entertain a motion for Mr. Walker to put forward 2 names with the 4 votes, and we could discuss that.
So moved.
And we could, you know, and if it fails, it fails. If it passes, it passes.
I'll second it.
So on the merits of going forward with these 2 names, is there reason to question doing that? Or would we someone rather have a different candidate for a different reason, or?
Well, so here's my rationale for the motion. I believe, and I want someone to correct me immediately if this is not the case, I believe with the 2 candidates that have 4 votes, all of us voted for at least one of those candidates.
That's correct.
Okay. So given that, that's where I think we should start the discussion. And if we can't agree, then I'm fine giving the selectmen 2 people, because 4 out of 5 is that's the consensus I was hoping for. So I'm comfortable giving them both, and if we can decide on one, that's even better.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the resumes, and I'm missing one. Becky, Chuck, I don't have Adrian Sullivan's.
You have a red envelope, that red folder there with clean copies of all of
The
them?
new ones. Thank you.
It's
It's the same
just
thing,
clean
it's just
copies
clean
of-
copies.
Got it. They don't have all my notes on them?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Can I speak to the motion?
go right ahead.
So, and I don't want to belabor it, we can go ahead with the folks with the 4, but I would, since the others, I mean, it's 1 vote with the, I can see just, if we could just walk through the 3s and the 4s and come up with 1 or 2 names of the selectmen, as compared to just cutting it off at the 4. I feel like we owe these people a little more discussion, I guess, would be my thought. But other folks might not think that.
So we
Anyone
have
else?
a motion.
Well, so certainly, if we would open it up to 3 votes, I would be an advocate of Adrienne Sullivan, for the reason that she is both an elementary and middle school parent. She has finance experience in the business world, which will help with budgeting. She's an educator, which all of you said was important, not necessarily me. And I just think that she would hit the ground running, just certainly from what I've heard about this individual. She is somebody who has a lot of energy and would certainly be a contributor to this committee. So I appreciate what Bagley Jones has presented, and, you know, if open to creating a bigger than the 4 pool, I would be an advocate of bringing her up into that group.
So we're not speaking to the individual that we want to bring up, we're speaking to the motion that we have
Well,
right
the
now,
motion is
correct?
at the moment, the motion is to put forward 2 names to the selectmen at our joint meeting for consideration. Now, we could change, I
4
mean,
votes.
we can change that. I mean, you know, but we could, I mean, the motion was that, as I recall, it wasn't to
That is-
narrow the pool
that
to
is
2, it
correct.
was to bring forward 2 names.
That's to bring forward to the Board of Selectmen?
The motion was to focus the discussion, limit
All
the
right.
discussion to those 2
Right.
individuals.
That's
All right, well, that's
Right.
different, then that's
Right.
not what I said, so
Correct.
let's make it
Just making sure I heard it
He
correctly.
made the motion, we'd go with that. And we're focusing, the motion is to focus the discussion on 2 individuals. Any further discussion on that?
Well, so if we include, I think I'd like to keep this. First of all, let me say this to the candidates. I'd like to commend each of the candidates who came forward. I think that all of you did a great job of giving us a flavor for what you would bring to the position and what your commitment is to the schools, and I applaud you all for that. That being said, I'd prefer that the discussion focus on the strengths of the candidates that we have more of a consensus on, and less on why particular candidates are, in my view, less qualified. So, said differently, I'd like to say positive things about the people that we have agreed on, and I think I can do that. I think if you open the discussion up to the 3s, then I might have some different things to say.
An alternate approach, if we took essentially one vote that brought it down to 5, we could always do something like, well, of the 5, if you had to pick 2, and try to bring it down a little closer from there. So if people think there's really a negligible distinction between the 3s and the 4s, that might be a way to pick 2 from, I agree with Mr. Walker. I don't want to get into discussing 5 people. I'd rather narrow it to 2, and if people, his suggestion is the 2 that got the 4 votes would be the obvious 2, but if people would rather walk around the table one more time and do 2 votes out of the 5 to try to narrow it to 2 that way, thinking that they might have, whatever.
I think this is the math teacher in you starting to come out. We have 2 candidates where there's a clear consensus, and fortunately, we have 2 candidates where every one of us voted for at least one of those candidates. So I don't see the value of doing another vote where we say, so what do we really think about the 3s? We've already said what we think about the 3s. And we know who thought they were in their top 4 and who didn't. So what is it we would be trying to accomplish with another around the table?
You, Mary, Linda Lee, Glenn, we might have a different idea that would sway somebody else's vote. Like Mary just said something about Miss Sullivan. I was like, okay, that's thoughtful, and thinking about, okay, well, what about Mike and Julio, Chuck and Becky? Is there something that you might have to say that would make me think differently? I just mean because I hear you about the 2 votes, and that is okay too. But on the other hand, we still have 20 minutes, and these people did come forward.
If you want to fill up that 20 minutes, I'm happy to
I feel like we have the time
withdraw
to-
my motion. We can have more discussion.
I think that we have the motion on the table. I think we should vote up or down on that motion, personally.
Anything else, discussion on the motion then? So the motion is to, for the time being, limit our discussion to the 2 people who had 4 votes. All those in favor? Opposed?
That's out of the table.
Well. All right, so it is 3-2. Do we want to talk about, at this point, making a single recommendation to the Board of Selectmen? Yes.
I am just full of comments tonight. It's the school committee. I feel like, it's the person we need to work with, and we should make that decision and as a recommendation to them. On the other hand, it would be nice if we weren't alone in making the decision, but it is our school committee, and so I would just as soon put forward one name, but I could go either way.
Mhm.
And no offense to the selectmen.
I see that again.
And the chair is taking none, shaking his head in the front row. Well, the issue is to try to bring it to one. Someone care to begin a discussion or make a motion, or we could do the discussion in the context of discussing a motion. We could just hold an open discussion as to choosing from between the two. Sorry. Ms. Kelly.
I would move that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen appointing Chuck Karimbicus,
Karimbicus, good.
partly because of his financial expertise. I think anytime we can bring another set of eyes and ways of looking at things with regard to our budget, I think that would be a tremendous asset to the committee. Besides the fact that he, I think, is an elementary parent, I think that will add another perspective on this board. So I would be, that would be my recommendation and my motion.
It's a
So you're
motion.
making a motion, or are we just discussing
No,
this?
that's a motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Walker?
So, since it's been seconded for discussion, for those paying attention, Chuck was not on my top 4, he was in my top 6. I think Becky Padera is a much stronger candidate. I think that as we went through the criteria, I think she's got a record of involvement that I find impressive. I thought she brought an energy, a visible energy, that I think would make her a great member of the team. She fills the elementary parent criterion. That wasn't one of my criteria, but I think it's valuable. So I think she's a much stronger candidate overall.
Anyone else?
No, go ahead. All right, so this is, I had both of them as my candidates on my top 3, actually. And so I see strengths in both of them. I agree with you that Chuck brings the budget perspective, and, 2 kids in the elementary school, and he's a great guy. I think that Becky has a little bit stronger pull for me in that some of her involvement, so 2 years as the PTO president, as a part of that, she met monthly with the superintendent and, was a part of those committee meetings where all the PTOs across town, so she really has a good cross-town sense of involvement. She spoke to something that I didn't hear anyone else speak about, and that was pulling people into the process early before their kids enter school, and really, looking at our greatest asset, involve parents at a younger age and getting their support. And she also talked about the importance of what we had done in terms of, as other candidates said too, bringing in the budget discussions to the elementary schools. But she specifically talked about the parents of young kids. So I think that also her work on the accreditation process at her former school, I think, is another valuable asset that she brings to the table, understanding that process and having been a leader in that process. So while this is really difficult for me to choose between the two, I think that Becky is a stronger candidate.
Kristen?
Well, it's a good position to be in, is to have all these folks to choose from, and then these two, because I think they are very strong, as I thought other people were very strong. I do hear, Mary, what you're saying about the budget experience. And I do obviously think that that's important, but when I look at the two in term, well, I mean, there's a lot of really good things about both. I would say, looking at Becky's resume, that she does have more volunteer experience in the schools, that Chuck has started to do that, which is great, and should continue to do that. But Becky, as you said, has met with the superintendent, she's been on the PTO, she's done a bunch of other things in the schools, search committees, things like that. But what I like, and Linda Lee referred to this, is that even though she's an elementary parent, but she also has professional experience as a high school guidance counselor, but it's the high school part, not the guidance part that I'm looking at. Not being biased for guidance folks, but.
You can give her credit for that.
Yeah. But she also coached, she worked with peer educators, she worked on substance abuse, bullying, blah, 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 blah. And she was on the steering committee for the accreditation process. And those are all things that we really need from a high school level perspective, I think. I think those things are really important, having just gone through the accreditation process. So I think Chuck has some really strong things about him. I liked what he talked about, being a team player, and, you know, how do you represent every level, being available, going to events, listening to everybody, don't have preconceived notions. I thought that was all really strong. Keep up the transparency, likes, you know, the school committee and the school district getting along. I thought those were all really, really positive things. I think he's a committed volunteer. He's new on the volunteer level, but that's great, because that's what we need. But I see Becky as having both the professional experience from her high school, elementary parent, and then the PTO, et cetera, volunteer experience in the schools as being more, has more depth to her volunteer experience in terms of longevity and different things. So that's it for me.
Also, I have them both in my top 4, and I think both of them would do a really good job on this. Not to reiterate things that have been said, but I think Chuck has a budget experience, Becky has being on the PTO board, and Mary Gormley's monthly meetings has a certain amount of budget familiarity with our budget in particular, which I think counts for something too. Becky has an education background, as was said, which I think counts for something. Both elementary school parents. I think it's a very tight call between the two of them. Personally, I think I would lean towards Becky on my call. So we have a motion on the table. Mrs. Kelly.
So, just to save Mr. Karambakas a negative vote, I would withdraw my motion, given the comments of the committee. I would offer that, I think I'm the longest-serving school committee member on this board, and the highest curve is budgeting, without a doubt. I would offer that perhaps even some people on this table aren't as familiar with the budget as they should be, not as should be, but as needed. And I think financial expertise is something that doesn't come to this board often in terms of, in election process. So I appreciate all the thoughts that you have about the particular candidate you're in favor of, but certainly from my perspective, serving on the finance subcommittee for all these years, that would be a welcomed addition. But I understand your priority, so.
So if Ms. Kelly has withdrawn her motion, Mr. Walker.
I move that we recommend Becky Padera as the new appointed school committee member to the selectmen.
Is there
Second.
a second? Any discussion on that, other than what we've already had? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it's unanimous. The selectmen are not posted to join us for another 7 minutes, so if cable doesn't mind, we'll take a recess because we can't start before their posted time.
Good evening. Tom Hurley, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. This is a joint meeting of the Selectmen and the School Committee, and we're joining the School Committee already in session, so I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order right now.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
So our business item for tonight is to fill the vacant seat on the school committee left by the resignation of Mr. Cohen. And,
It's all his fault.
yes.
Let's all vote on that.
And so the process is we have to have a roll call vote to fill the vacancy. In our meeting that we've just come out of recess on, as you probably have heard, we have a recommendation that Becky Padera be appointed to fill the empty seat.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say, I don't envy you at all. You had 11 tremendous resumes, and I don't know how you ever went through and narrowed it down, or for that matter, how you ever went through with 15-minute interviews and actually kept them to 15 minutes. But kudos to all of you. You did a great job. And you may want to just, I listened to the past hour, so I heard the rationale, but for the benefit of the other two selectmen, maybe you'd want to go through what some of that rationale was just quickly in terms of selecting a candidate.
Just briefly, we started by going around the table and talking about the general qualities and things we were looking for in making our choices. There was some consensus on some items and some differences of opinion on others, but there was a consensus that of some familiarity with one or more of either educational experience or budgeting experience or volunteerism in the schools, or a variety of different things would help a person get going quickly in this position. I had made the statement at the beginning that, this is a 10-month appointment, and so personally, I was looking for someone who could come up to speed quickly. That wasn't necessarily everybody's thought, but it was, I think there was consensus that the more background a person had with respect to some of the things that we do, whether it's, budgeting or school issues or so forth, would make them a more qualified candidate in most people's minds. There was some suggestions that balancing the committee among, as it was mentioned, we have two parents who are high school parents and three of us who are parents of graduated students, that trying to get parents representing younger students would be a good thing, to bring a familiarity with part of the system that is, only a memory to some of us. So, there were issues like that were brought up. We went around the table and basically each gave our top 4 names, and from that, 2 names came forward with 4 votes out of the 5. And so we looked at those 4, talked for a couple minutes about it, and then
Top 2.
the top 2, the top 2 who had votes from 4 people, talked for a couple minutes about it, and then motion was made to recommend Becky Padera to fill the seat. So that's, in a nutshell, how we got to where we are right now. The process is specified by the Mass General laws. We have to have a roll call vote.
Correct.
So we would go around the table and
Do we each poll our own committee, or do you want to poll?
I
the
think
entire-
you should poll your committee and I'll poll our
That's
committee. The form of the vote isn't specified, so whether it's a motion to appoint that person and it's a yes or no on a roll call, or it's, we go around the table and everyone says a name. It's not specified in the law, so it's not clear, but probably the simpler way is to make a motion to appoint.
That's fine.
person
What-
that
you
we
make
would
a
all-
motion on yours, I'll make a motion for the selectmen, and, Or just
We
one
probably
motion?
only need one motion because it's a
That's fine.
joint committee.
Okay.
Joint meeting.
yeah, that's fine.
So, the school committee voted to recommend, so I'll take the unusual act of making the motion myself on behalf of the school committee, since it was our recommendation to appoint Becky Padera.
Can I second that?
You can if
Yes,
you'd
you
like.
can.
That's a real joint meeting.
Is there any discussion that people would like to have at this point?
I'd like to comment. First of all, it's my pleasure to return to my chair on the school committee, even if it's only for a short time. I've always loved education, And I feel that this current school committee loves education too, and you're doing a great job. And the Milton Public Schools are flourishing under its current administration. And I'm thrilled. And once again, as I walked in here tonight, I said, thank God for these new schools, because I knew them in different times. And hardly a week goes by where I don't say thank you for what I still call the new Milton Public Schools. In terms of the candidates here, some of them I know firsthand, and I was surprised that there was 12 that were interested in the seat. It seemed to spark more interest than perhaps some of us would have expected. I think that the field of candidates is an outstanding field. I know a number of them personally, and they're outstanding individuals. I will, knowing that this person is going to be serving with the other school committee members, I feel that it is important that you have a distinct role in selecting your candidates. You've narrowed it down to 2. You're recommending 1, and I'll go certainly support that recommendation of the school committee of Becky Patera.
Anyone else wish to make a comment? Mr. Kane?
When I came here 24 years ago, I didn't realize that I would cause so much hassle on the school committee. But I won't make an apology for it. I did listen to all the interviews at home, and I said to my wife, you know, by the time I got to Becky Pedera, just before she was interviewed, I said, I'm still waiting for the person who is going to fill this seat to say that they just want to help out, that they don't want to reinvent the wheel, that they're not coming in here with an agenda. And when Becky sat down here, that's what I heard. So while she wasn't my first choice, I did have somebody else who was my first choice, who didn't make it to the end here. Becky was definitely my second choice, and so I wholeheartedly agree with the recommendation.
Anyone else wish to make a comment? If not, then we'll move to a vote. And so I'll poll the school committee, and Mr. Hurley can poll the selectmen.
Right.
So, Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ms. Chardon?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley, yes.
Congratulations.
I will, just in case she's not watching, I will inform
I couldn't
Ms.
imagine she is.
Ms. Padara, and I will write a letter to the town clerk, more importantly, informing the town clerk of this so that she can be sworn in until
I
the
think it
town.
would be really nice to write a letter also to all of the people who
Right.
came forward to put their names in and thank
Absolutely.
them for it, and
I will do that.
encourage them to continue, you know, to run it in election time, too.
And just, I mean, we've been saying it all night, but just to really thank folks for putting their name out there and taking the risk to do this and to go after something, and it's tough. It's really tough to do, and I give them a lot of credit for doing it, and I wish we could have appointed them all, but it's not going to happen.
I think Mary Gormley would have won the pool because she thought there was going to be 10 candidates, and I said, no, there's no way there's going to be 10 candidates. So I think Mary probably would have won.
But not only that, the fact that you are not an appointed member of the school committee doesn't mean that you can't contribute, come to Citizens Speak, present issues as you see them come up, encourage the participation wherever you can, and I think that will only benefit the Milton Public Schools. So thank you to all of them.
An election's coming.
And
I was going to say the same, 10 months is not too far away.
right. And on that note, I think I, and then shortly thereafter, Mr. Hurley would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Cable.
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.